Hey everybody, welcome back to the Billy Club, the show where we take a look at the adventures of Marvel's Crimson Crusader, month after month, starting with his first appearance back in the 1960s. I'm Nico, and you guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at NicoAction. That's NicoAction.
And I'm Tori Sheehan. You can find me on Twitter at Tori_Sheehan and on Instagram at SMTori. That's Tori with an I. You can also catch us at the Billy Club Pod on all your socials.
Absolutely. And I feel like when you talk about Daredevil, it's hard not to talk about the overwhelming reliance on tropes applied to blind or unsighted people or people with extreme disabilities. I myself am legally blind and require like a lot of corrective eyewear and stuff. So like I have always kind of understood the nature of the blind story elements that they've incorporated into Daredevil over the years. I don't personally have that kind of experience. Like I know I'm not a blind person. I don't go through that. So when I look at Daredevil, I'm always watching it really carefully. Like, hey, you know what? I don't go there, so neither should you. And this issue tests my I don't go there.
This one, like, we just finished in the last issue, which technically is 2 months ago for readers at the time, that Karen's running away crying because Matt screamed, "I can't do that. I can't do the eye surgery thing." And now, like, you look at this cover and it's just like, "that he may see, blah, blah, blah." And you're just like, oh, I guess that's gonna resolve really fucking fast.
I thought this cover was such a great pastiche of the time. It has all of those elements of like a John Wayne movie poster. It's got that very spaghetti Western kind of vibe. I could also see this being a re-release cover for Camelot or, you know, any one of those big War of the Roses type medieval fantasies, you know, Game of Thrones without the incest or the boobies. Mm-hmm. So but then why? Why? If you're going to leave out the incest and the boobies. So
I mean, you got to be historically accurate.
You got to be historically accurate. But I don't think there is anything scientifically accurate about anything that happens in this issue. We are, of course, here to talk about Daredevil number 9, That He May See, which is the most dramatic title.
I mean, only dealing with the murderous menace of the Killer's Castle, which in fairness, like, it makes it seem like the castle is like also a problem, but there's just robot guards. It's not like the castle itself like starts to attack you, which would have been awesome.
Yeah.
Super awesome.
And it's sort of built in. It's like an electronic castle. It's like ready to go zip zap at you at any moment. And so then why doesn't it? Where you at, castle?
We could have rose redded all over this thing.
So I need to ask you a couple of questions before we get in. Mm-hmm. I love talking about this with you. I feel like one of the things that we've discussed is our love of format, because like, I'm going to segue a little bit for a second, but I'm going to go to our strong place. When I say to people, oh, I write musicals, one of the things they say to me is like, oh, that's cute. And I'm like, where did you go for musicals? Did you immediately go to like Rodgers and Hammerstein? When I say I'm an operettist, and people are like, automatically, I'm thinking Puccini. And I'm like, you should be thinking electronic dance music. And when I say musical, I think of horror musicals like Sweeney Todd. I think of satiric musicals like Curtains. I think of classic form updates like Phantom of the Opera. I think of challenging reimaginings of genre like the recent Oklahoma revival. When I think of musicals, you can't get me to think of one genre. Why do people try to say superhero books are one genre?
Because they all look the same.
Okay.
You know, like I as someone who did not grow up within the superhero comics world and therefore like doesn't have as much attachment to like how things are done and how things are different. Like to me, it was always just a bunch of men in their little costumes. Some are red, some are green, some are blue. And then they have their secret identity where they're very rich and they have their very cool penthouse and they're hot ladies, or they're very not rich but somehow still manage to keep the lights on for some reason even though they don't have a job.
Magic.
And sometimes there is no secret identity. They're just like from another planet, so they just like live like this forever, and like they're a walking like quasi freak show when they're amongst normal people. And so like it all kind of feels the same if you don't know like all the layers of like, this one was a romance one, this one was a detective one, this one was a pastiche about colonialism, whatever. So I get it. And I think that's also because like I also grew up in the 90s. So like for many of us, it was like the halcyon days of DC in the mainstream media. Like Marvel wasn't as big of a deal at the time. Spider-Man was, but that's about it. And I think that it's a lot easier to just be like, DC's sort of all the same. It's Batman, it's Superman, and you might be able to name one other one.
Wonder Woman of the Flash, yeah.
Yeah. And so like, that's sort of just where we all lived. And I think that also, I think it's also the fault of the people who were creating the media, because it was very much just like you gotta beat the bad guy, you gotta have the hot girl. Like they were building James Bond in tights, kind of.
So, you know, it's such a important distinction to me that we recognize that like these books can be different. And like, you know, hearing that your experience as somebody outside of the sphere was such that you didn't know this wealth existed, you know, it's really easy for me to see how people would boil down all of superhero comics into one thing. But here we are sitting at the 9th issue of Daredevil, and I think we're going in for our 3rd or 4th genre.
Yeah. This made me feel like they were taking on like the Dracula mythos without any of the vampires. Like that idea that they used to do in the Victorian times where they were like, let's write books where the mysterious, handsome, rich man is actually the worst thing to ever happen to you. So you ladies don't get any ideas about talking smack to your dad and running off into the countryside to find some dude on your own.
Yeah. But speaking like, okay, well, that's an important thing that I don't think enough people might realize, that like a lot of horror tropes are really tropes about other things. Aliens are meant to be frequently, you know, xenophobia. Werewolves make you gay, essentially. Vampires are lascivious, creepy older men. And honestly,
robots are minorities.
Yeah, for sure. But like vampires also get that Eastern European kind of thing, you know, that very Romani people kind of vibe where we have culturally treated everybody with a vague Eastern European accent as, you know, creepy and crawly. And like, that's crazy that we do that as a culture with our media. But more than that, this guy's just a doom stand-in. And it makes me realize how much 60s doom is just an offensive trope.
Yeah, this is very much the 60s in so many ways. They name it Lichtenbad. Like they come in really hard with like the beginning of the Cold War vibes, naming him Klaus Kreuger. Like it's all very like, it is very much like fight, you know, the first couple of James Bond things where everyone is vaguely like Cold War Russian, Estonia, whatever. I was unimpressed with the villain in this one.
Yeah.
I was very interested in how the ending played out.
Yeah. I mean, it really does kind of come off like a trauma film's version of Doom. He also doesn't look like he could possibly have gone to school with Matt and Foggy. I know Matt looks 10 years younger than Foggy. This guy looks 7 years older than Foggy. I don't see how these three all went to school together. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
We are. Let's talk.
Let's talk for a second about the book.
About a boat hijack. And it's not even a big boat.
No, But we kicked things off, written by Stan Lee, with layouts by Wally Wood.
Layouts and delineation.
Yeah, I really think that shines through in this issue. And there is certainly nothing against the bouncy Bob Powell, who, Bobby Powell, thank you for coming in and keeping what looks like a Wally Wood book going. But
And hey, Sammy Rosen.
Hey, Sammy Rosen, you doing your letters, man. You keeping it going. But I genuinely am, you can see this one isn't Wally Wood. It just doesn't look as good.
It doesn't. And there was a part of me that was wondering if it was because we don't have the psychedelic 60s NYC behind it, that it's all very dull, boring, gray, other country. And like on the one hand, it makes Daredevil super red and super like interesting, like your eyes immediately following him through all the things. But it does make it a little like from what we've been used to, where we've been talking about like, oh, this is so psychedelic, it's so bright, it's so crazy. And then we get to like more realistic and we're like, I mean, it's fine.
Yeah. The big thing that I want to point out, and like I don't want to sound like an idiot for a second, but like if you've ever driven into the Bronx from Jersey and you've taken the Helix, you know exactly what I'm about to talk about. That is straight up the support under the Helix. Like that is straight up. I'm going to Van Cortlandt Park for the afternoon. Like that is 2000% the right color and the right positioning.
Yep.
I feel like I need to lock my doors as I'm driving. This is 1000% driving to see my family in the Bronx, and I don't know how they got it so right for like a giant splash page, but yeah, that's pretty.
Somebody
accurate.
Must live there is my guess. But
1000%.
like also like he gets shot and then he falls in the, honestly, pick one, the Hudson or the East. Neither were particularly clean at the time. Like it is a shock that he doesn't get sepsis from this. Like
no, I mean he is literally going into shock. The rest of Daredevil is a fever dream.
It could be.
It really could be at this point.
Could be. These like rando gangsters, and he's like, oh, thank God I got shot. The Coast Guard's here. And I'm just like, are you okay, buddy? Like,
so I need to go there with you because something that we've talked about a lot, Daredevil does his best work injured. And is this our first Is this our first owie?
This is like our first like major like, oh God, I got clipped by something and now I'm a little broken.
Yeah.
Like normally he either gets, until now he's been knocked out and then he wakes up later, or he's like fine but tired.
He like, just did too much lawyering and billy clubbing.
But like this is the first time where it's like my arm, yikes. Which is like, it's so hot. Sorry.
No, I mean I get
real good, like holding his arm.
That
like,
pose. Oh my God, that one very sexual pose.
Oh my God.
I do feel the rest of the images look a little color formed in. Like Daredevil does not look like he was necessarily drawn into some of these sequences exactly. Perhaps Wally Wood did a little bit more work on the Matt figure and left Bobby Powell to do a little bit more of the backgrounding. But that one panel of Matt with the, what I have to assume is a color surprint error lettering where the white letters came out yellow. So I think it's just color surprinting. That one is really sexy. But then for a while, it gets kind of like the book finally had a sense of identity. When you love a TV show, like a sitcom, and then it's got that rhythm and it's feeling really good. And then you get to what is clearly either by production code or story idea, a holdover, and you feel it and it's wrong. And you can just tell. That's sort of what the art does here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I don't know if maybe that the verbosity that we get, which is a little more than usual, and a very gumshoe kind of conversation, which, I mean, it's the 60s. They all sound like this, but this is like mega extra. This is Stan Lee being like, how many fucking jokes can I pound into this as fast as possible? And you have to wonder if it's like sort of to be like, so that we have less to draw, maybe kind of deal.
I do really think there are a number of situations throughout this book where they manipulate the way the panels are set up to really eliminate anything but the main figures in the panel. It was really hard not to notice, especially in the castle, where it's a castle. You could do some dim lighting, but there's no backgrounds.
None. So I also I always love a good shirtless Matt Murdock moment. You know, I love how he keeps on his glasses even when he's alone. I really do think nobody knows what Matt looks like yet.
I would believe it. I would believe it, because if you don't need to design his eyes and have another design element to copy, why do it?
Yeah, why bother? Why bother? Got to keep the jaw square, the glasses round. He looks great. He looks great. And then we move into the romance plot again. It is so slow. It's so slow. I will say, calling this country Lichtenbad is hilarious, because Liechtenstein is already a very, very tiny country. And then to be like, yes, but what about Lichtenbad?
Do you know what Liechtenstein is most famous for?
There's one dude, right?
Dentures. They produce like 70% of the world's dentures.
Super into teeth.
One factory complex in Italy is responsible for like 80% of the world's sunglasses. I
believe that. Those fashion fucks.
Matt keeps them all wealthy.
Honestly, he does. Dr. Van Eyck in Lichtenbad. He left America. So now maybe she'll drop the subject, you know, but she's got a surprise. And oh, don't we all just love surprises? If only we could stay this way forever, arm in arm. Oh my goodness. Could I believe that she's maybe in love? No, I can't. She's not in love. I won't even think the word. And then they like show up, and Foggy. Why is Foggy playing golf? Like, this is a weird sight gag when you're trying to like not do your art.
Is it because, and this is something that I'm not trying to be mean over, is it they're having him do something Matt can't do?
Is it all just like a visual joke of like, he has to pretend he can't see Foggy has to pretend like Matt has to say like, oh, just fixing some stuff, I hope he doesn't see me golfing, like what, like you're also like golfing in front of Karen, like.
So then Karen's just okay with you lying to Matt about work. It's ableist jokes never land. They never landed. This just makes everybody involved seem like a piece of shit, except Matt, who actually maybe a little bit, because Matt knows they're doing it, because Matt's not really an unsighted person.
Because that's the thing, is that he knows what's going on, and he continues to hide himself from them and pulling like this long con betrayal.
It'd be so much funnier if he just kicked the golf ball and was like, oops.
And he makes the hole in one.
Yeah, it's like there's ways to do it that don't feel like an ableist mockery of a blind person's daily experience. Like by having him stumble and kick the golf ball hole in one style, it would be like, oh shit, he totally let them know he's got this. Yeah. But instead, we just sort of get a putsy Foggy and a sort of helpless Matt, and Karen pushes my limits here.
For him to see, I just want him to see again for his sake. And I'm like, honey, his blindness makes him so cold, so distant, that it doesn't matter to me. Bitch, it matters to you. You won't shut the fuck up about it.
Girl, that's not his blindness. That's his Catholicism.
Which also, like, I would think she would have a serious problem with. Because
you would think this. You would think. But maybe she's just super into Kennedys.
I mean, who isn't? RFK, I think, is still alive at this point. Like, get on down.
So the other thing I think about this is, not to hyper-personalize it, but growing up, I certainly had my share of people who have tried to fix me for whatever thing that's wrong with me, whether it was a well-intentioned person who was like, hey, but wouldn't you just be happier straight? Or, you know, whether it was somebody being like, but have you tried not to have anxiety disorder? Like, just don't get worked up.
Have you, I think my favorite was, why don't you change everything you've ever worn in your life and dress like someone, and maybe they won't bully you? And it got so much worse. So much worse.
Yeah.
Wear makeup to school as an 11-year-old.
I feel like Karen here is literally a bully. And I understand it's from a perspective where she is a figure with no power.
Mm-hmm.
But she's somehow kind of powerlessly bullying Matt. She's like negging him.
Mm-hmm.
But like, she's, you know, when I think of negging, I think of angry neckbeard. This is my incel channel. But like, she's clearly not an angry neckbeard with an incel channel. She is a strong, confident woman for her era, trying to do well by herself and her friends and her family. And they just write her like she has one goal in life, and that is to vilify the blind.
It feels like she has like Florence Nightingale syndrome combined with like the opposite of Munchausen's by proxy, where she's like, I have to fix you so that everybody knows that it was due to me that you are able to be all you are, and I'm your savior now, and you will be attached to me because of it. Like, you will see what I have done for you. She's the acolyte who tries to convince the god that they owe me. I know there's a lot of that. We're going to get into like a lot of that.
It's a lot.
Like, he will see me. And I'm just like, if you think that it's like the opposite of Ursula, he can't see your looks. He can't see your pretty face. All you've got is your voice, and you're not fucking pulling this off. Come on, honey.
No. And speaking of not pulling this off, I don't know that I recognize this Karen from last issue visually.
She is back to a 1950s hairdo that is not correct for where she's coming.
And then this guy comes in looking real 1950s monster movie.
I'm thinking like 1940s.
Oh, like 1940s monster. European. Yeah, okay. Yeah. There's a real sense of this issue is, you know, when Marvel does a book like this now, it's like someone coming in doing an old-timey war comic. You know, it's Garth Ennis doing something that doesn't involve beating on Daredevil. Like that ever happens. But, you know, I find myself furious with that this issue has some sort of weird long standing in fandom. I just don't think it's a great issue. And like, I'm not being hard on it angrily. I'm being hard on it constructively. It is, number one, really problematic, both for xenophobia and ableism, misogyny. It is problematic on like a dozen levels. And there's still something yet that is look, I know I already called it xenophobia, but there's also an element throughout this story of revolutions are only violent topplings of regimes.
Yep.
Like, it's not just that foreigners are bad, which they are according to this. It's that foreigners are also bad at each other. And there's this sense of American determinism of the state of the world that runs rampant through this books with an almost McCarthy level vitriol that I just don't like being in this issue of Daredevil.
No, I do not enjoy where we're going to be taking this. And the fact that not only is it that all revolutionaries are violent, but they also need a white guy from America to lead them to success.
who's never been there. That's my first fucking thing. So he notices right away from the helicopter that it's a walled-in city. Mm-hmm. How does he not feel the electricity crackling? Can't even. Number one. Number two.
He's busy.
He's busy being in a helicopter getting the 5-star treatment. So then I love that the doctor is like, look, maybe I can fix you. The x-rays might be ready tomorrow. But that Daredevil is so quickly ready to run around this country is something I find challenging. It's not just that when Spider-Man and Daredevil first take to the skies of Manhattan, they're learning to be superheroes. They're learning the terrain. They're learning how far to gauge a jump. They're learning the air pressure and the altitude. And that's actually something that I'm pretty sure Daredevil talks about when they moved to California, that he's like, I don't know these rooftops. And I don't like that this is Daredevil at like peak fighting form in a foreign city after a bunch of travel, after a bunch of sight tests, after getting shot. Like, this feels to me like it is not a Daredevil story, and the sight thing has nothing to do with anything. It could have been Donald Blake and his bum leg. It could have been Doctor Strange and his fucked up hands. It could have been Xavier in the wheelchair. There is no one that this couldn't have been.
Yeah. And I just feel like I feel like we talked about in the last Stiltman that it had a great twist. Like the obviously evil one isn't the evil one.
Right.
And this one they're just like, no, it is.
It's not. Even when it is, it's not.
Yeah. And you're just like, oh, this is really what we're doing now. And I think like for me, it's sort of like, all right, we're just going to go through the numbers on this one. But what does make it interesting is underneath all of the really dumb dialogue and all of the ableism and whatever, we have a lot of really interesting things about fear and sight and things for Daredevil, because like one of the things about Daredevil is the idea of like, if he could see, he wouldn't be so daring. And oh, you're making a face. Is that not that's true, right? I'm not crazy.
Oh, it's totally true. Okay. It's just the dumbest goddamn thing.
Like I still love the fact that he's stuck on, if I gain my sight, I lose my super senses. Like the idea of like, how ironic that Daredevil, the man without fear, is mortally afraid of ever regaining his sight. And I'm like, Matt, you are making a mountain out of a molehill. Like, we don't know. And also like, you like, outside of the fact that he has these senses that help him despite his because he can't see, he has still like enough abilities otherwise. The radiation didn't make him super strong or super fast or whatever. Like, he is trained, he is smart, like he has a lot going for him.
He built that electronics lab.
Yeah, he could still do plenty of superheroing. Even if like he lost his super senses, he would figure it out. He would adapt.
I agree. That's why I was making those faces, because like it truly bothers me that there is this sense of, if he regained his sight, like we even see elements of this years and years and years later in the pages of Spider-Girl. Actually, it's a parallel story that we're covering over in the X's for Podcast universe, dropping on Mondays, where we're taking a look at the complete 225 issue, aged in real time from the 1960s, late 90s MC2 universe. So the characters have all aged in real time. So it's about 16-year-old Spider-Girl, the daughter of Spider-Man and Mary Jane.
Of course.
And it's about characters like that. And there's an issue from 2003 where Spider-Girl is fighting Doc Ock, and she knows she'll never beat her if she's looking for where she's sending the arms. So Spider-Girl, having been trained to do this by Elektra, puts on a bandana over her mask eyes and fights Doc Ock blindfolded. Because if she can see, she'll be afraid. But if she moves by intuition, she can't be stopped. And that's something Elektra taught her.
It is an interesting metaphor.
No.
But it's a terrible like action to put down. Like it's
it
like
is
so upsetting.
Infuriating. Yeah.
And we'll get into it more. But first off, we need to watch Foggy see Matt and Karen snuggle at the airport, pull a reverse Casablanca, where the girl and the guy she's not really in love with but is going to stay with anyway stay behind, and the hot guy she's in love with goes away. Like it's just like, and this is the point where Foggy also gets very like fuck Matt, which is so fascinating because for so long he's been so into Matt,
he's been so cucked to Matt, and like,
but also a little bit like, if you got us both drunk, like maybe.
Yes. Yeah, there has been definitely a sense of, I could do a little college handy J's, right? But he's so fucking mad about Matt. Because here's where Foggy, this is a different Foggy. I don't know. We've thought Foggy's kind of annoying, but this is fucking louse Foggy. He's lying to his blind best friend. He's punching a mirror till it breaks. Like, what the fuck?
He's hoping his best friend doesn't come back so he can get the girl. And then he's like, oof, probably shouldn't say that. And then he's like, yeah, but it'd be better if he wasn't here. And I'm just like, buddy, he's like, I have never felt that Foggy Nelson is as good of a lawyer as Matt Murdock. And I understand that it's because we're always looking at Matt Murdock. We very rarely look at Foggy Nelson. I'm sure Foggy Nelson's the one who actually keeps the lights on by getting like normal cases, which makes him a good lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely.
But something tells me he would not have renown without Matt Murdock. So what the fuck do you think you're playing at, bro?
I completely agree. And, you know, throughout the years, we see only Foggy could try this case. We do see Foggy's competence. There's that moment in, just like, because, I'm sorry, it's close enough to canon. The TV show, there's that moment where Marcy basically says, Foggy Bear, when you lay it down like that, it is so hot. And like, yes, when Foggy gets it right, and he's charming and charismatic because he believes in the little guy, it gets caught in my throat. And like, that's my Foggy. And like, that's my Foggy. And this guy is an abuser, and he is a user, and he is a mean man. And I don't like him.
This is a Foggy who I do not believe would go into a private practice for the little guy.
Agreed 1,000%.
This is 100% a Foggy who goes into a private practice so he doesn't have to listen to a boss, and so he can dick around with his best bud all the time, and maybe someday make district attorney.
I was about to say, this is the Foggy that becomes DA someday. Yeah. This is the louse Foggy that we don't like up until like 100, and then we don't like again throughout the mid 100s. I don't love Foggy till Born Again.
And it's so interesting because like, we'll get to the ending, but like Foggy goes from being like the hapless sidekick to kind of a problem.
Yeah, a manic problem. Like, and actually.
Not even like a problem where everyone who's watching is like, that's a problem. Like where I'm actually like, Pat, there is a fox in your hen house.
Yes.
Like, no.
There's another universe where Foggy is the bad guy.
It 100% is. Especially that. In the meantime, someone wanders around saying he's got a bulletproof vest when it's really just chainmail.
Yeah, the second he walks off the plane, the Klaus von Bueller or whatever storyline that, you know, future Klaus Janson over here is like, I'm the dictator of this country. I am a doom stand-in. Things are bad for my people. I have this eye doctor. There's something very soap opera plot about a lot of what goes on here, and it moves so quickly, and it's so background.
and his police, like his main police dude has like a Hitler mustache. These are the only human, I guess the police are human and the palace guards are robots.
I guess.
Because like, I was so like, oh yeah, this assassination attempt. Like I didn't really look at them. And now that I'm looking at them, I'm like, no, these are humans we've got right here. So like, what is up with that? And then like, he's like, I sense he's like, I sense all this fear. I sense all of this like weird like rage. And like, and then he's just like, and then he's like, okay, let me go meet the eye doctor. And I'm like, do you realize you've been kidnapped?
Like, do you realize you're about to put yourself on an operating table?
Like, and also, sorry, before when Klaus shows up and everyone's like, let's get him this eye thing. I was like, this is an intervention for blindness. And yes. I was like, this is wild. I can't even. How could you call these people friends?
You can't.
Like the only reason that he kind of sort of sticks with them is that he somehow has internalized this idea that he should be trying to fix himself. But he has this sin inside of him that's like, but I really want to be punching people. And like, I know that we don't get into Jack Murdock very much in these, once we pass like the origin first episode, but like the idea of like what his dad would want is for him to go get the operation, to be able to see again, to marry the nice girl, to have a good law degree, to quit and to do all that. What his dad doesn't want him to do is be punching people at night in a red costume like he did.
Yep.
And so like he's sitting there knowing that that's what he should want, but knowing that he really wants something else. And so like that's the only way that I can imagine that he can keep these people as his friends when they are not thinking of him and taking his like thoughts into consideration.
I think there's also an element of judge not lest ye be judged. He knows that by determinants of being Daredevil, he's automatically keeping lies. So it's fine to be with people who are a little lesser because of the lies.
Also, like, the fact that this is the only, like, the best eye doctor or, like, the only eye surgeon, I'm like, really? The only one? And he's in Iowa or bumblefuck Nowhereville instead of, like, in New York making billions of dollars next to Doctor Strange? Are you fucking kidding me?
And, you know, I understand that Lichtenbad is wealthy because their leader is wealthy, but it's hard to believe that they have access to all of the technology, all of the medication, everything. It'd have to be flown in. And yeah, it can be done, but we're talking about just like there's so many suspensions of disbelief. There was an easier way to tell this story, all said and done.
Yeah. So I do admit they're doing a very good job of making sure that he's never swinging by his bad arm, which I appreciate. I do appreciate that. But I also think this is the dumbest thing that Matt could have done for his secret identity. There's one new guy in town, and then Daredevil shows up, and no one goes, huh, that's weird.
Yeah, maybe he came in on the helicopter in general. Maybe he just like snuck on the helicopter. Like that, like maybe he Pym particles himself down and came in somebody's pocket. Like, I don't know how people can possibly make these like exceptions. And then when he moves to San Diego or San Francisco, can't believe I just said that. When he moves to San Francisco and he's out in California and all of a sudden Daredevil's out in California.
I mean, it really makes you realize that like at this time period, the police departments aren't talking to each other. Like that's why so many serial killers like got away with shit, because even like from town to town, they would not talk to each other. And so like they would get away with wild shit because like if I were them, I'd be like, Daredevil showed up here and he used to be over there. Let's check the flight records of the past 6 weeks of who came from New York and has stayed.
Yeah, well, and I have to give it up to Stan, because Stanley, you managed to work in lines of dialogue that make things that I hate plausible.
Yeah.
You make how much I hate things plausible.
Yep.
When he says, I don't even need to unmask you. It doesn't matter. You're nobody to me. I'm like,
yeah, I guess that's a thing that would occur. Sure. If you're crazy enough, or like, you must be the head of the revolution. We don't know who you are. So you must be costumed. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess.
Yeah. I'm just like, all right, Stan, I get it. You know, but I think it's sort of weird, the order of stuff. This maybe does seem like a Marvel method kind of situation. I probably would have preferred all of the eye doctor stuff up front and then all of the adventure stuff, not eye doctor adventure, and then all of a sudden there's a nuke, and there's just a little too much. It's not a bad issue, but it's definitely one of the weaker of our 10 episodes so far. It just clunks.
It clunks. It's also like the fact that you would have a saltwater moat to keep your sharks, because that wouldn't leach into your soil at all.
Yeah, there's nothing about this that makes a whole lot of sense. And I was really confused when all of a sudden there was a nuclear plot. I was really thrown off by this ploy. It feels very like, so you've got the world's greatest eye doctor. I hope your knees never give out. I hope you don't need a knee doctor after you send this bomb. I hope you don't need any scientists.
He'll go steal one.
How? He's about to nuke the world.
Well, then he doesn't need a knee doctor.
But he wants to live.
No, he doesn't. He says, I'm taking you all with me.
Oh, you know what? You're right. He
but
says, I'm taking you all with me.
If you're going to beat me, I'll take you all with me. But let's not get past this little fight here with the man on the throne, his little force field, his robots, like all of this stuff. And also, I would just like to say that, first off, they mentioned my union, which is very exciting for me, but they use it incorrectly, because Actors Equity does not include circus performances. We are scripted performance only. But then, like, first off, these fucking prisoners. But secondly, they're like, guard. And the guard comes in, and then he chokes a robot. I don't think the artist knew that these were robots.
I have to agree. There's a lot of decisions made in this art.
And then, or like he put like Wally didn't know that they were robots. And then when Bobby came in, he was like, oh, they're robots, but I can't completely change the way that Daredevil is holding him, so I'll just add in some wires on their elbows so that you know that they're robots. And I'm just like, woof. But
maybe they decided that it was too violent, and so roboting it instead of blooding it.
I don't know. But and it would make sense then why the police are human and then the robots are robots. But also this is the point where I was like, they are using dialogue to cover up art.
Oh, for sure.
There is no reason for this rando prisoner to be negging our hero this whole time.
Yeah, there was also some stuff in the first fight where it was really clear that they were just covering hands and they were just covering faces and stuff so that nothing mattered.
Yeah. And then Daredevil uses his butt to knock out a couple of robots.
Like a good bottom.
And then he changes back into his suit to convince the eye doctor to leave.
But the eye doctor's already on it.
Yeah, because he's like, I don't get it. You either think the doctor's in on it, in which point you should be in your Daredevil suit, or you think he's not in on it, and him following a blind guy is not going to help. So
this really feels like they found a drawer issue and they just slotted Daredevil into it. The amount of Foggy and Karen that are actually in it is down to 2 pages, really 3 pages.
Is. But the amount of horrible they pack into Foggy in this.
Oh yeah.
He's so mad. He punches a mirror. Karen definitely looks like this is from like, this should have been an episode from like the first time that she meant, this would have fit in really nicely, like as the third or fourth one.
Yep.
The first time she brings it up, that she would have been like, oh, the guy, let's do this. Because like, this is definitely like the Foggy we saw in the beginning, who was a little more of a louse and then got slightly better over especially after he got kidnapped. Like, he's gotten better. So like, her hair makes sense. He makes sense. Like, and it's all terrible. It's all terrible. And then the worst Matt face ever, page 14. We finally got Matt without his sunglasses, and honestly, put him back on, bro.
Yeah, his eyes are in a different style than the rest of the book, which is certainly hard to miss. Mm-hmm. But I do love that very G.I. Joe, Real American Hero looking chest.
I mean, yeah, he honestly, I was like, this is a Captain America like draw over, 100%.
And again, it's a war comic. It's, this really does feel to me in a lot of ways like at this point, we lose all backgrounds. It's just different aspects of the castle. The forced perspective gets kind of strange. Everything is this blue or yellow. There's a lot of leaping at weird angles. So like on page 16, the perspective on Matt coming toward the panel, it makes it look like he's got cat legs. Mm-hmm. It feels like this, and don't get me started on how long his legs are in the panel above it. It really feels like this great art team was not given the amount of time they needed to do their work. Yeah. And that's what this is. This is a great team that really didn't get a chance to shine on a really forgettable issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, and then we have into the denouement, which is the scientist. So he says, I have a nuke of cobalt that will sweep over the earth. I don't know if that's how cobalt works, but sure. And then the scientist is like, let me turn it off. Oh, I'm dead.
From radiation, no less. Didn't become the Hulk, just died.
So I guess cobalt radiation ain't where it's at.
Except there is the Cobalt Man.
Oh, fuck. Well, that's the end of that. But then Matt kills a guy. Now, I know that you said that little Stiltman guy comes back. But this would then be for the reader at the time, he kills 2 dudes in a row.
Yeah, he does.
And that's not the Matt we think of when we think of Daredevil.
I agree.
Especially one who afterwards goes, in death, may he find the peace that could have never be his life while he lived. Perhaps it's better this way. And I'm just like, Matt, you've got a lot to confess this week.
Really does. And that's one of the things that I think we wind up seeing happen more and more early on when they're not sure who Daredevil is and they're trying to reformat the title over and over again. It reminds me of something we didn't care for about the first issue, where he was like, good, die fixer. Yeah. Saves a trial. Oh, does it?
Does it?
Lawyer man?
Is that what you believe in?
Since when is that how we do law here, Daredevil?
I mean, honestly, though, that is how we do law here, just not for old white guys.
Yeah, kind of.
Oh, but real quick, I almost forgot this, that right before he goes to die, the doctor sees Matt underneath the costume. He sees him because he's an eye doctor. And he was like, I wasn't looking at your eyes. I was looking at your body.
Well, meanwhile, in the issue earlier, when he says the x-rays will be ready tomorrow, because tomorrow they'll be able to see through all the deception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just want to make a comment. You said something about, Klaus dies this issue. This is, in fact, Klaus Kreuger's only ever Marvel appearance.
I believe it. He's a shitty villain.
Yeah, he's just a stand-in Doctor Doom. What's really interesting is this issue elsewhere is credited to Bob Powell in general. So it is of note that, not only is this an issue that Wally Wood is barely on, but Wally Wood does write and draw the next issue. So it's not like he's off the title. But, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that makes this issue feel kind of weird and maybe a little all over the place. And, you know, seeing Klaus Kreuger fall to his death, I kind of would love to bring him back now just to be silly. But I do not want to see this Foggy Karen shit come back.
There was no operation. He must have lost his nerve. He's not brave. I hate myself for speaking about him like this. And yet, if not for Matt, I'm sure Karen would be mine. And just like the evilest pose.
He looks like an evil newsman.
He really, really does. And then Karen's like looking out the window, like he'll return as he left without his sight, never daring to fall in love, never knowing how much I adore him. I'm like, bitch. Don't make me bring up the gif of the genie from Aladdin that says, tell her the truth.
Pretty much. The other side of it, like, do they think blind people can't get married? Well, wouldn't it just be easier to woo him?
I honestly actually have to look into that because like we still have a lot of laws on the books about disabled people getting married. So like it's possible that like he wouldn't be considered a person. Or like she's pretty sure that he's getting I don't know enough about disabilities in the 60s outside of the fact that we used to put a lot of them away. So I'd have to look into it. But it's possible that she like thinks that, I think she still thinks that she would lose social clout to marry him while blind, especially if she thinks that he can fix it. Because then it just becomes willful. It becomes like someone who's like, well, you say that you're not an alcoholic, but you won't give up drinking. Or you say you're not a gambler, but we keep losing money. And I don't know. It's very difficult to tell with Karen because she's written by dudes.
She's written by dudes who have no connection to her.
None whatsoever. At best, they might be dealing with the fact that there's a couple of gals in the office and some of them like their mothers. That's about it.
Well, you know, at this exact same time, there was a pretty big deal, kind of feminine event going on in the Marvel Universe. This same month is roughly when the wedding of the Fantastic Four in the pages of Fantastic Four Annual number 3 takes place, which Matt is at.
Wait, say that this is the wedding?
And no. Fantastic Four Annual number 3, the Fantastic Four, Reed and Sue get married, and like all of the heroes of the Marvel Universe are there. And it's roughly this month in the comics. So right around this time, Daredevil shows up to the wedding of Sue and Reed Richards, who are at this point just affianced.
Right. But does he show up as Daredevil or as Matt?
You know, I'd have to double check because he's one of the characters who could show up as either. He's been their lawyer, but it's more like if, you know, Xavier showed up, he would have to show up as Xavier, not like as leader of the X-Men. So like, you know.
Why?
Because nobody knew Xavier was a mutant until 2001.
What? They just thought that he was sympathetic?
They just thought he was a kindly geneticist who was a leading expert in mutation, like Moira McTaggart.
And ran a school for mutants?
Yep. And then he came out on TV while possessed by his evil fetus twin sister, Cassandra Nova, the Mamundra, after she executed 16 million mutants by possessing the creator of Sentinel's nephew.
I can't wait to Chrono Scrim this one.
Oh, it's so good. It's my favorite. It's E is for extinction. It's why we're called X is for podcast.
Oh, I thought it was, okay. I thought it was like a C is for cookie. Okay.
No, it's E is for extinction. Well, because the idea is that X-Men crossovers used to be like X marks the spot. X is for extinction. So take everything you know and throw it right out the window. E is for extinction now. And it was about really confronting your expectations of a book. And, you know, I'm glad that we tangented a little bit because one of the things is we're about to have our expectations of Daredevil tested over and over again for several months. We have a pretty wild two-parter. And then things get real wild. And we're going to go to the mighty world of Khazar.
Oh.
But before that, we have a 2-part story edited by Stan Lee with art and script by Wally Wood with layouts by Bob Powell. I don't know how that happens, who's doing what, but it's going to happen. And it's going to be a very different kind of Daredevil story. And we really are in the point where they just want to test everything until they figure out what works.
Yeah, they really do. They really do. And I think that that's for us now that we have 400 issues to deal with, like it's very interesting. But at the time, I don't know how they built a fan base.
Who is this for?
Who is this for? And aren't you alienating each genre, each person who picks it up for a specific genre?
When next month it's totally different.
Right. Or in 2 months. TBH.
Yeah.
Because there can't be that many comics people who are like, I don't care like what version I'm getting. I'm just super into red tights and like a little bit of romance on the side. Like that can't be true.
I agree. That's that funny book mentality. It's all the same kind of comic. Because like I know that there's runs of heroes I don't read when, you know, traditionally magic kind of superhero gets real technology based. I probably skip it. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
You know, if I want that, I'll read Iron Man.
I'm so fascinated. And this is the part that I'm just like, I would love to know like what the structure of the company of Marvel was at the time. Like, did they have a marketing department? Did they have like these? No, it's really just 5 dudes in a studio.
It's just 5 dudes in a studio until like 1971 or so.
Okay, so then that makes a lot of sense. That they had nobody from the outside really saying like, if you do this, you may fuck it up.
Right. They just had their experience. That's it.
Yeah. And so like, it must have garnered enough attention for them to keep doing it.
Right.
So there's something about Daredevil that makes them be like, well, we're making enough money to keep it going. Because I'm sure there were plenty of lines that they started in 64 or 60 or 63 and then just stopped.
Not a lot of titles, but a lot of like major features in like Tales to Astonish, who did 8 issues and then never came back.
Right. So like there has to be something about it. And I know that Daredevil sort of speaks to them in a way that is similar to Spider-Man, but more adult, because I know that Stan Lee, as much as he resonates with Spider-Man, doesn't get the teenage part of it.
Not really.
So there has to be that feeling where like Daredevil is everything that Spider-Man is, but for us who are 25 to 30. Kind of?
Well, no, I'm with you completely. It's like a more age-appropriate coming-of-age book. Because in so many ways, that's who Matt is. He's coming of age. He's figuring out how not just to be a superhero, but how to be this superhero at this point in his life. And that's, I think, why there's so much does it or doesn't it work, why there's so many going back and forth. I know I'm excited for what's coming. I know that I really enjoyed that last issue, but you know, this one, not so much. The next few are maybe a little bit tough, but you know, we're really getting through the worst of it for sure.
Oh yeah. And I think everyone's aware that there's a reason why many people are told don't start in the 60s, that like it's not worth it. And I think that it's a shame because you do miss out on some gems, but there are other times where you're like, no, I see why.
Because who does this improve the experience for?
Yeah.
Who is made better by reading a book that's kind of racist, kind of ableist, kind of misogynistic? Who is it improving the reading experience for?
Exactly.
And the answer is kind of nobody.
And to be honest, it's going to get so much worse.
Unfortunately. But the good news is we'll always have Matt to keep us grounded and moving towards somewhere better. Because even when the title flounders, Matt is our red beacon.
Aww, I love that.
Well, until we come back to love Matt a little bit more, Tori, where can everybody find you on the interwebs?
They can find me on Twitter at Tori_Sheehan and on Instagram at SMTori. That's Tori with an I. Where can they find you, Nico?
You guys can find me doing all the amazing work for our partner show, X is for Podcast, over at xisforpodcast.com and on all of the socials at X is for Podcast. Don't forget you can check out my original work in the Young Men in Love Pride anthology. Super proud to be part of that book. It's super incredible. And if you'd like to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, you guys can follow me at Nico Action. That's NicoActionN. Until next time,
stay fearless.
That was the best. We did it perfectly in sync. It was amazing.
Oh my God. Who are we?
We're like professionals.
Are we a team?
We're like a team.
This is a team up.
I love how much gayer I got when I thought that it was no longer recording. I'm just saying.